Everybody, David Shuster here. Welcome to Take Action News. So glad to have you on board on all of our syndicated stations, including Chicago and Columbus and Michigan and Oklahoma, and everybody who is watching us around the world on our live YouTube channel, Take Action News TV. Be sure to subscribe so in case you miss any part of the show, you can have the videos delivered to your inbox at your convenience. As always, I'm pleased to be joined by executive producer and often host of this show, Daniel Marins. Daniel, welcome to you. Also a welcome to Pete Callahan and Rachel Calvert, who is helping us in our DC control room. And folks, what an amazing news week this was. And when we want to start the way we normally do, and that is go through some of the news and what it means for you and what you can do to influence outcomes. And the big one, in my view at least, in terms of action opportunities, involves the United States Supreme Court's decision to essentially gut the Voting Rights Act. The Voting Rights Act, which was passed by Lyndon Johnson in 1965, one of the sort of the hallmark policies that were enacted to try to level the playing field and make sure that everybody was able to exercise their right to vote. The Voting Rights Act essentially required that southern states with a long history of racism and of doing things to put up obstacles in front of minority voters, that if they wanted to make any changes before an election or in the course of altering their system, that they first had to get pre-clearance from the federal government. And what the Supreme Court ruled this week is that because it has been so long since the Voting Rights Act that things have changed. And so therefore the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act and said, it's fine if Congress wants to come up with a new set of arithmetic or algorithms or calculations to figure out whether somebody is complying with the spirit of the Voting Rights Act, but that the old standards in terms of how the federal government evaluated changes by the states, that those would be wiped away. And that if Congress does nothing, then states are essentially free, and they're free in the interim to do whatever they want. Here's how the decision was first explained on CNN.
After nearly half a century, the U.S. Supreme Court pulled the plug today on federal supervision of 9 mostly southern states whose records on race relations were deemed a threat to minority voting rights.
On the steps of the United States Supreme Court right after that decision, Edward Bloom, who was attorney on behalf of officials in Shelby County, Alabama, he said he was pleased and that everybody who fought the Voting Rights Act in this particular case, that they felt that this was indeed the appropriate decision by the Supreme Court.
This decision restores an important constitutional order to our system of government. And that requires that all 50 states and every jurisdiction have the laws applied equally to them.
Now, as we said, because the Supreme Court has essentially gutted the Voting Rights Act, but essentially left Congress with the ability to go ahead and come up with a new set of standards, the focus now turns to members of Congress and whether or not in this bitterly divided era, whether Congress can actually come up with a new set of standards for these southern states. A lot of us are highly pessimistic that Congress will be able to come up with anything, but nonetheless, Sherilyn Ifill, who's the president of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, says her organization and others will indeed try to ratchet up the focus now on Congress.
We believe that Congress is in a better position than the Supreme Court to determine how voting discrimination plays out in this country. We're disappointed, but now the ball is in Congress's court.